This woman healed her severe PTSD without a therapist, thanks to an accidental discovery. As a psychotherapist, I was initially a bit skeptical when I first heard her story, but it turns out she'd accidentally discovered some powerful psychotherapy principles. So stick around because her story is amazing. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us. I was very intrigued by your email. So tell us a bit about your story then.
Yeah, my story is very complex. So I kind of start in the middle. It's just easier for me. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I lost someone very close to me. She was my foster mother growing up, and she was a very significant person in my life. And I think as a child, I always felt very safe with her. So then when she died, it kind of blew open all my trauma. And I began having lots of flashbacks, memories, but I didn't really understand what was happening. And at the time, I had a very aggressive autoimmune illness, and it got 50 times worse during this process. So as the memories and the trauma was flooding my system, the inflammation levels reached very high levels, and I had a near-death experience. And this was during COVID, where I couldn't access any sort of medical care. So I went through a whole month of terror where I was literally being like tortured by my own body. It was really aggressive. And every time I rang for help, they weren't really helping me. Instead, they just kept prescribing more meds, and the medications really affected my brain. So afterwards, I was quite sick, where my whole nervous system just felt damaged. I was very confused. I had all these memories and all these questions, but no idea where to even begin healing. And it took me 2 years really to make a decision. Like, I went through some therapy, and I had some community support, mental health at that time that I needed. And I made the decision then to go no contact from my family, because I couldn't really process anything while I was still in contact with them.
Sure. I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, that sounds really, really rough. And yeah, you're not the only person I know. I think that, a lot of people I know in recovery, in 12-step recovery have gone no contact with their family as well. And I think sometimes it's sometimes necessary to get away, especially if it's not a supportive environment. You mentioned you did some therapy before. If you don't mind me asking, what kind of therapy did you do? Do you know?
In the beginning, it was some community support through a psychiatric nurse. I just went to see her every week because at the time I was in very severe distress, and I was having lots of panic and fear. I wasn't really sleeping. The chronic illness was still quite aggressive, and I had so many questions. So I didn't really like being alone. So I used to just go to her once a week while I waited to have trauma therapy. And then I saw a trauma specialist for 6 months, and she was really good. She was really supportive, but I could never really go deep enough. I was only like around this, like basically surface level. And it was around that time that I made the decision to go no contact. But I suppose that's a huge decision. So, and it was very traumatic for me because
Yeah.
losing everyone, my whole community, everyone that I loved, that was very hard. But at the same time, I felt like they were all weaponizing my mental health and seeing me through a very negative lens. And I felt very unsupported. So when you're in the middle of a crisis and everyone's treating you like you're kind of crazy, that made me want to hide away, because I think it triggered so much shame in me, and I wasn't able to handle it. I think they just didn't understand that I was struggling with anxiety, fear, lots of emotions, and lots of physical illness as well.
You felt this way about your family then, that they didn't understand?
I felt like they were always talking about me,
Yeah.
and I just felt like this a spectacle, and I felt very misunderstood and very
Yeah.
alone in that environment. I didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Couldn't be myself at all.
Yeah. Yeah. That must have been really, really difficult. You mentioned you saw a trauma specialist. Do you know do you know if they did any kind of trauma treatments with you?
She introduced me to the inner child, and we
Okay.
did some back and forth dialogue.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first time doing inner child work.
Okay. Yeah.
It was really interesting because the first thing when I sat in the inner child's chair, the first
Mm.
thing I said was, "Am I bad?" So that was like
Oh.
a really core belief. And I remember the therapist felt really sad hearing me say that.
Mm.
So it was like a big moment because I had no real memories of my early years. There was about 6 years that I had just completely blocked out.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of a working theory that they can, they basically blank out the trauma, basically.
Yeah, I think it was just years of chronic dysregulation and fear and confusion. And in order to cope, I was just dissociating from it a lot of the time. And I remember, I think it was around Christmas, like 3 or 4 years ago, I was just very, very distressed and upset. I wasn't really making any progress in terms of processing the memories, the flashbacks, understanding whether they were real or not, because I didn't fully trust my memories. And I was very
Yeah,
confused. And I think she was very afraid of getting too deep with it because I was very fragile,
yeah.
which is understandable. And then my time ran out. Yeah, I only got so long. I got
Yeah,
20.
it's annoying, and it's also annoying, isn't it? Like the other thing as well that always annoyed me about therapy. I mean, I had a really good, lovely long-term therapist before, but one of the things that used to always really bother me is like you get to the end of the session and you feel like just before you get to maybe a breakthrough, it's like, oh, sorry, that's the mindful of the time. Yeah, it always feels like it's never long enough. It sounds to me like that broadly speaking, you had maybe what might be considered what's called broadly a kind of a psychodynamic approach. I don't know if they told you kind of what approach they use or if you know, but yeah, psychodynamic is, I think, inner child is kind of ties in with what's called the psychodynamic approach. And this approach can be a lot longer term. Like it can take years, which is why, certainly in the UK, it's not always first line treatment for treating things like PTSD, because it can just take an awful long time. However, there is the argument though that the changes can be longer lasting than other modalities like cognitive behavioral therapy, aka CBT. But either way, it sounds like, so even after 6 months, which is still quite a significant amount of time, it sounds like you're still having panic attacks and flashbacks and difficulty sleeping.
Yeah, still lots of nightmares. And I was in very severe distress from walking away from my family as well. That was like,
Yeah,
it was very hard for me to do that, but it felt like I had no other choice.
yeah.
It felt like cutting off parts of myself and dying, like my whole life died.
Yeah, it can certainly trigger grief for sure. Like when you walk away from something that you've known, and yeah, it's like a part of your life did kind of die. Even if that environment wasn't, if you felt that environment wasn't supportive, it could still trigger a grief response there. You've maybe lost a bit of community and belonging there as well. I mean, I don't know what your social life was like, but whenever we don't get our needs met in balance, that can also contribute to mental distress.
Yeah. But that was definitely a huge factor, feeling isolated and alone, the children being separated from cousins and not have, like, we used to spend a lot of time with them going to the zoo or the park or whatever, and that was all just cut off. So it was very distressing trying to adapt to this new normal.
It sounds like you were in a really, really vulnerable and dark place there. And if you don't mind me asking, often when we are in those really, really distressed states, I mean, did you have kind of dark thoughts? You don't have to go into detail about those, but did you had dark thoughts about kind of, maybe I'd be better just, pulling the plug?
The thoughts felt intrusive. They
Yeah,
didn't feel like they were mine, but they felt like it felt like a force pushing me to, like, to hurt myself, and I didn't want to. I was fighting it, but it was
yeah,
hard. It was those thoughts were there all the time, and I think my inner child as well felt that way, like that the worst has happened, so maybe we should just exit.
yeah. And I just want to say that, as someone who's also had PTSD, full-blown PTSD and panic attacks in the past, I've also had those same, dark thoughts too. There was a time in my life when I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to be here anymore. This is too much. I can't live like this anymore.
Yeah, it is hard to live because it's just constant stress, constant
Yeah,
crisis. There's no
yeah,
rest, there's no peace. And
yeah,
then you're trying to work and function and do your normal stuff whilst feeling like you can't cope. So it's hard.
yeah, yeah. It is. It's really, really difficult. And I think unless you've really, really been through it, like I'm not sure if people really truly understand what PTSD is like. It's so, I would not wish it upon even my worst enemies. The insomnia, the panic attacks, the constant anxiety is just, it's absolutely horrendous, isn't it?
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
flashbacks feel very intrusive as well because it feels like
Yeah.
it's happening right now and it's so
Yeah.
in your face.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
flashbacks I could just be sitting here having a cup of tea and suddenly
Yeah.
it feels like there's someone in the room and it's a
Yeah.
flashback. And it took me ages to figure that out,
Yeah.
that this is a memory.
Well, the amygdala, the security center of the brain, doesn't necessarily know that. It's like, yeah, it's like having a really, really sensitive fire alarm that doesn't know the difference between, an actual fire and a bit of burnt toast. And you kind of get like a whiff of that, those old memories, and the amygdala starts sounding the alarm and pumping adrenaline out and putting us into that fight or flight or freeze mode. Yeah, so it sounds like you were in a really, really dark place. And then you mentioned that you then started practicing effectively internal family systems, or IFS for short, but you didn't realize that you were practicing that. So tell us a bit more about that.
It started with the therapist when she introduced me to my inner child. That
Hmm.
gave me something to focus on. And I found that really helpful because I realized that through talking to myself, self compassion, self love, that I could soothe and calm those symptoms. And it took time, but over time, I started to go into my memories and process them in real time. But I was really careful. I don't really know how I knew this. I just knew that I have to be careful not to plant memories.
There's actually a phrase for this that's called, I believe, false memory syndrome. And back in the day, I mean, I'm not necessarily against hypnotherapy or hypnosis. I think they can be used therapeutically. But back in the day, there were a bunch of cases where therapists accidentally created false memories of abuse, child abuse, in their patients, and as a result, a bunch of parents went to jail because they then called in the therapist, of course, as like a bit of an expert witness, and as the therapist says, yeah, well, my client said that this and this happened, and then some people were wrongfully imprisoned because of that. So yeah, you were very smart not to do that.
Yeah, I tried to I think the dissociation helped during this phase because I was detached.
Yeah, I've had that as well. Yeah, I don't know if you know DPDR, depersonalization, derealization, but it's like a form of dissociation. Like I've had that before. It's yeah, you just like not you don't really feel like you're fully in your body, and you feel kind of detached from yourself.
Yeah, I think that helped me process some of the darker memories and the traumas. And each time I would see myself rescuing the old versions of me, whether it was a medical trauma, a childhood memory, or when I was a teenager, but I would go back into the memory and pull her out and then speak life over her, start healing her. And I'd tackle the beliefs as well. So if she had a belief like I am bad, I would tackle that belief and question it and we would change it. And over time, it felt like my nervous system was healing, my thoughts were changing, but it was a slow process. It didn't happen overnight. It took a few years.
So it's interesting. So it sounds to me like in a way you accessed what's called in IFS, we call it the self or self energy, and you were able to somehow bring some of that self energy to these traumatized parts of yourself.
Yeah. I see it as the most like this version of me, I suppose. Like the me now is healing the old version
Yeah. Wow.
with the Holy Spirit. Because like he's the healer, but together, that's how I do it.
Yeah. I mean, some people are going to be watching this and they're going to be very, very cynical because they're going to be like, what is this, woman talking about, Holy Spirit? Like, what's this got to do with psychotherapy? But what's really interesting is, do you know the kind of the Latin roots of the word psychotherapy? Like, it literally means soul therapy. Psyche is soul, and therapia is therapy. It's literally soul therapy.
But that's what it
So
evolved into for me because now I see it as soul healing. Like I don't see
yeah.
it as just parts, even though they are parts, but I see it as I'm healing my soul that was
Hmm.
broken through trauma and bringing me back together, making me whole again. That's the way I've learned. That's how it makes sense in my head. But I'm sure it makes sense in everybody's head different because it is complex.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. So would you go as far to say then that you basically recovered from severe PTSD without a therapist, more or less?
I'd say I'm like 80% there at least,
Yeah.
I still have my triggers and my days and things that I work through, but overall, I'm so much better than where I was.
Yeah,
I'm not having nightmares. I'm not having flashbacks.
it's
Even when I
amazing.
even when I have a memory, I'm not getting flooded. My first instinct is to just go to the child or whoever and sit with it, process it, and move on. So it's
Hmm.
taking up a lot less energy and space. I'm more productive. Like even my house, it used to be chaos, where I'd struggle to cook and clean and do all the things. Whereas now I seem to be much more on top of everything and everything has gotten easier. But I still have bad days, obviously. I'm
We
still
all
going through
we
it.
all do. I mean, even us psychotherapists and coaches, we still have bad days. I still have bad days. The only difference is, I've got some scientific understanding and maybe some techniques and a few things I know that will probably make me feel better. But yeah, that still doesn't immunize me from having a bad day. I think
But
it's I
we're
think it's
human as
human.
well. Like even
Yeah.
people who haven't gone through trauma, they still struggle. We all struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, on this, this planet that we live in, this kind of broken world we live in, it's hard not to have some form of suffering, I think. I mean, I've worked with people who are doctors and clinical psychologists, psychiatrists. I mean, they all have their own challenges. I've also worked with the ultra rich. They also have their challenges too.
Money doesn't solve everything.
It really doesn't. It really, really doesn't. I mean, if it did, then we wouldn't see, so many celebrities, unaliving themselves.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So it sounds to me, so the majority of your healing then didn't happen with a therapist. It happened without a therapist. Is that fair to say?
The last therapy session I had was in 2022, I think. And it's now 2026. So the last 4 years, I haven't really had any medical support or any psychiatric support because I think due to the medical PTSD that I experienced 6 years ago,
Yeah.
I had so much fear. Like even going to the doctor would fear.
Yeah.
So I felt like I had no other choice, that I had to do it by myself. And even though it was isolating, but I didn't feel safe anywhere
Yeah.
because I had gone through a 10-year battle with my physical health as well. And that was
Yeah.
very traumatic.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean that's what we would call a kind of a comorbidity perhaps, and these kind of other symptoms that we have can kind of make things worse. Like some people, for example, get back pain, and then like that back pain then affects your quality of life, affects your sleep, and then can make some people feel kind of more irritable or more depressed because they've got those mental challenges as well as the back pain. So wow, that's really fascinating. So I just want to understand. So kind of by accident, you kind of you started kind of tapping into self energy, or Holy Spirit energy, if you want to call it that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, I believe the Holy Spirit is the Lord and he moves through us. He communicates with us. He helps us as born again believers. So, like, he's not the self, but he's part of our intuition
Hmm.
and our inner guidance, our conscious mind, or your, how would you call it when you do something wrong and you correct yourself? What's that voice? Like your conscience, and it's part of your intuition. So, listening to your inner intuition, listening to what you need, trusting your body, and just being guided by my inner world as well, and moving through
Hmm.
that journey kind of day by day. So every day, I was also kind of fueled by my symptoms. So if I had lots of symptoms on a particular day, I would sit and ask, why am I feeling this? If I had loads
Yeah.
of anxiety, if I had loads of pain in my body, I would sit with it and then go into the memory, heal it. And often some of that pain would shift out of my body as well as I
And
healed
when
the
you
memory.
and when you say go into the memory, so like how did you do that with this kind of Holy Spirit energy?
With just sitting with the memory in my mind and then seeing myself going to the child, praying over her, asking the Lord to heal her mind, heal her brain, her body, her nervous system, and
Hmm.
then just speaking to her, asking her what's wrong, what do you need, what happened to you, and just having a dialogue and a conversation, and
Hmm.
that would really help me to process the memory in
Hmm.
real time.
Well, it's interesting because it sounds to me like there may be a bit of what's called reparenting. going on there, and like programs like, I don't know if you've heard of Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. It's like a 12-step support group, and they do a lot of stuff around reparenting.
I used to call it that a lot, like reparenting myself, because
Yeah.
I felt like a lot of my trauma came from not being like, or for feeling like I had to do everything myself, or I was the responsible one. I was always the one in charge, I suppose. So that led, I think I was always very hyper independent. So learning to put my trust in something outside of myself as well. So
Right.
like, for me, that's my fate, putting my trust in God that He's going to heal me and He's going to bring me to that completion, and just continuing on that path towards healing.
Yeah, it's certainly really, really interesting. Again, I'm sure there will be some cynics and skeptics in the audience, but this is your story, your journey, and I'm actually not that phased, because and I'm not that cynical either, because, and the reason I'm not is because from the world of 12-step recovery, there have been a lot of alcoholics who have reported having had these like spiritual experiences, and they've had these experiences and they've said like they've lost the desire to drink. There's actually a book, Came to Believe, and it's full of like these kind of testimonies from these once hopeless alcoholics, and they report experience after experience of these kind of spiritual experiences that have lifted the compulsion to drink. And what's really interesting is that there was actually a really large meta study done on the effectiveness of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what they actually found, this was in the Cochrane Review, they found that Alcoholics Anonymous actually outperformed therapy for keeping people sober.
Because they have support the whole way through it, and they have community.
I think it definitely helps. Yeah, for sure. I think community, and don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-therapy. I mean, it's my it is my profession. Any clients who have any kind of addiction, any kind of bad habit, I tend to steer them towards some kind of 12-step recovery group, because I say, look, it's otherwise it's a bit like trying to swim the Atlantic Ocean by yourself. Like, it's probably not going to happen. I call it co-regulation. When we get really, really emotional, sometimes we need a power greater than ourselves to calm us down again. Now, that could be another fellow in recovery, but it could also be this miraculous higher power thing that gets talked about a lot in 12-step. If you want to call it God or something else, the Holy Spirit.
Like, I've experienced so many miracles in my life. I've witnessed miracles. In my world, it's not strange at all. Like, this is what I do for a living. So I've seen so many miracles. I've seen so many people get healed. I've heard extraordinary stories. And I had no idea, because I didn't grow up in that. I grew up Catholic. We had no idea that the Lord still heals today. That was never taught to us in school or in church or anything. So to me, like, ever since I found God, my whole life feels like a miracle, because it just opened me up to a whole new world.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible anyway. And again, I'm sure there's going to be cynics out there saying, oh, you must have done something else, or, oh, but it sounds to me like, well, look, you did your 6 months of therapy, and that didn't kind of, no, I'm not against therapy. I think therapy's great, if you get the right therapist, the right approach. But it sounds to me that, that sort of 6 months, a child sort of therapy didn't really, am I right in understanding it, didn't really sort of move the needle for you?
Yeah, I think for me, I felt pressure. They said, anything you tell me, I have to report. And that's the law here in Ireland. So that was one reason why I struggled, because I wasn't ready to go down that road at all. And they also, I think there was just so much shame, and I wasn't ready as well. I had literally just walked away. So it took me time, because I remember sitting and feeling very distressed again, because the flashbacks kept coming, the memories kept coming, but I felt very confused about them. And I wasn't ready to face some of those memories. And I remember just feeling the Lord say to me, the only way you're going to actually get free is if you face what happened. Like, you can't be in denial. And there comes a time where we have to remove that blindfold. But it's a very hard thing to do because that blindfold is there for a reason. It's been protecting you your whole life, you know, things you've buried, things you've suppressed, things you've blocked out that you're not ready to deal with, or maybe things you weren't allowed to deal with because other people will try to silence you or they'll minimize or deny or even blame shift if you've been blamed for something that wasn't your fault. So
Yeah.
it's very hard to remove that blindfold and face the truth.
Yeah. And when you talk about that blindfold, is that kind of like the blocking out the trauma? Is that what you're referring to there? Yeah. I think it can be very painful, can't it, to take that blindfold off, and we need to maybe do it very slowly and very respectfully, if we're using IFS language, to respect our inner system, and what we can handle.
There was a time that I had kind of a mental health crisis. I had two major episodes. And after the second one, I saw a psychiatrist briefly, and he told me that I need to slow down because I was trying very hard to piece it all together. And I was obsessing in my mind, like hours every day, journaling. And he was like, I know something happened to you, but it's like cracking a whip at yourself. You know, you're literally, I was pushing myself into severe distress and crisis. So he was like, you really need to slow down and take baby steps with this because I was very fragile, but I wanted to know the truth. But it took me ages after that to actually get to the truth.
Yeah. And I've been there myself, and yeah, you know, when I was going through the thick of it, you know, I was trying to do like self CBT, and I was trying to use, I was also doing journaling. I was also trying to apply, it's called the chimp paradox, trying to see like this, I've got this like inner chimp who's very afraid. Yeah. And I think my therapist also, well, he said something to me like, you can't think your way out of this. Like you can't, he said, you've got this beautiful mind that's trying to figure it out, but you can't think your way out of it. And yeah, he might have a point there. I think with healing trauma, it's not necessarily, in my opinion, it's not necessarily about trying to change the thoughts, but I think it's more about changing the relationship with the trauma, and also potentially removing the emotional charge from the traumatic memory. Now, there's various different ways to do that. I mean, you know, there's EMDR, there's eye movement desensitization reprocessing, there's internal family systems, IFS, and there's also newer techniques like the rewind technique, where you've basically you kind of replay the trauma as a film, and you fast forward it, rewind it, and you.
Yeah, I just remember it was with a lady that I was helping. She, again, her inner child, she had so much fear and anxiety. And I just said to her, there's a little part of you that is scared. So just hold her hand. And then I was like, remember, you can pause, rewind, or fast forward at any time. Like if this memory is too much, you don't have to stay in this part of it. You can pause, you can take a step out of it. So I think that definitely really helps, like knowing that you're in control as well, because PTSD makes us feel so out of control.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. Yeah, the rewind technique is certainly very interesting. There's emerging clinical evidence that it can, you know, quite quickly reduce the effects of trauma. I have my own self rewind audio people can listen to if they want to try to administer the self rewind themselves, and I'll put a link in the comments and description below. And there's also self EMDR. You can now do EMDR without a therapist. There is some emerging research to suggest that can work as well. Again, I think in the first instance, obviously try to go and see a therapist first. I think these techniques are normally much better to do with a therapist, but it's of course not always possible, right? Because of things like, for example, you know, I know that people who are in support groups like adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families, in those kind of support groups, they have fear of authority figures. So seeing a doctor, a psychiatrist, a therapist, it's really, really activating for them. It's going to be very hard to do some trauma work if you feel already really, really afraid of that kind of person or that kind of environment. So that's why I think that, you know, for some people, this could actually be the first important step for helping them to heal. And of course, yeah, it also costs money. If, you know, these days, I mean, you either have to go on a long waiting list, especially in the UK, or you pay out of your own pocket, and it's not always the cheapest.
Yeah. And there's limited sessions as well. So you just when you're
Yeah,
just when you're making progress, it comes to an end. And then you have to try
yeah,
and find another way.
yeah. So that's why, I think we need scalable trauma treatment. We need scalable mental health care. And yeah, it is, again, it is much better if you can do it with an actual therapist. But I think self EMDR and self rewind may be the next best thing. In some cases, it may be better than nothing. So yeah, I'll put a link to both self EMDR and self rewind in the comments and the description, because well, you and I both know what it's like when you're in that that really really dark place where you're having those panic attacks and the insomnia, and you just feel like you're in this constant fight or flight mode. It's exhausting, isn't it?
I used to have constant heaviness in my head from because I dissociated so much as a child. It caused this like chronic migraine,
Yeah,
and there was always pressure in my head, and it would it used to really distress me because I was having all these physical symptoms alongside the trauma memory, and I was so dysregulated. So my whole nervous system was in fight or flight, and that would increase the inflammation, the pain. So for me, it was very physical and very somatic. So I did a lot of somatic work where I had to get into my body. I had to learn how to breathe, learn how to feel safe. I spent a lot of time in the bath in the first few
yeah.
years. That helped.
So did you do this somatic work? Did you do this by yourself? How did you come across that?
I I probably came across things along the way that just helped me. Like I'm sure I did some meditations, I did a little bit of breath work, I did a little bit of everything. And then I
Mm.
found what worked for me. And if something helped, I just clung to it and kept doing it. So, and then I just kept going with it. Like I'd quickly figure out that doesn't help. Don't do that again. That makes me worse. Or this has
Yeah.
actually helped me. So whatever helped, I would keep. And I just spent a lot of time learning how to feel safe, learning how to
And
ground as well, and learning how to
yeah,
stay in my body because I had
yeah,
a really bad habit of leaving.
yeah, yeah. I can totally relate to that, and for sure, it'd be really horrible. Like, I think this tied in actually after having like some really big panic attacks. Kind of waking up but still feeling like I'm dreaming, and yeah, it was just such a horrible time. But yeah, for me, I found what moved the needle for me was EMDR. I mean, I did a lot of, we did, with my previous trauma therapist. I mean, we did a lot of inner child work, but I felt like for me, what moved the needle much more for me was the EMDR. I felt like things started to really shift then. So yeah, it sounds to me like you also took a kind of multi-level approach, or an integrative, holistic approach. So you were doing this kind of self reparenting with those, scared little parts, or scared little girls inside, and kind of praying over them. So in IFS, we'd call that channeling the, self energy. And then you also did some somatic work. So you were doing kind of deep breathing as well. Is that right?
Yeah, learning to ground, lear like, even name 5 things you can see,
In that.
having my dog near me and just touching her fur. So just always
Yeah.
trying to stay present in the now, especially when something activated, because I would feel like I was being pulled into darkness, and I didn't
Yeah.
want to go back there, so I would have to ground, stabilize, feel safe, and then address whatever was activating.
Yeah.
But it was definitely systemic, where I adjusted from all aspects, like body, mind,
Yeah.
soul, and even the physical. I would constantly pray for healing, and I did
Oh,
start to heal my like, I used to have chronic inflammatory arthritis throughout my whole body. My spine
yeah.
was degenerating. I had inflammation in my organs, my eyes. I was very, very sick, and
Mm.
now a lot of that is in remission. Like, I still have some aches and pains in my joints, but nothing compared to what it used to be. Like 5 years ago, I was walking with a mobility aid, and I was diagnosed with, I think, 5 different autoimmune diseases, including fibromyalgia. So, like, all of this made me very sick. And I do believe the trauma played a big role in the chronic illness.
What trauma does is it affects the quality of sleep. So a lot of people with PTSD and a lot of trauma, they get too much what's called non-restorative sleep. If they do get some sleep, it's not such a deep sleep. And it's in that deeper sleep that, parts of our body start to repair, like muscles and cells and all of that. So tell us a bit about what's life for you like now?
I'm running a ministry. I'm a mother to 2 children. I work around them from home. I still go at a slower pace. Like, I don't think if I went out and tried to get a full-time job around the home, the kids, and the ministry, that would wreck me, you know? Like,
Sure.
my nervous system is still sensitive. I still
Yeah.
need to
So is
go
mine.
at a
Yeah.
I go at a slower pace, but that works for me. So I have a Christian ministry where I help people deal with their trauma and their fear, their shame, like all these different strongholds that can occur within us from going through different traumas, and just teaching them that healing is absolutely possible. They can get free from it. And I have like a YouTube, a podcast. So that keeps me busy. And then I have my kids and my family, my partner. So like life is good, really. Like I feel happy. I feel
It's
positive.
fantastic.
I've come to a lot of acceptance as well. Like there was a time where I thought I would never be okay again,
Mm.
but the grief around my foster parents, that was a huge struggle for me for many years after they died. But I came to a place where I started to accept it, that they're gone, they're in heaven, I'll see them again one day. And I'm okay with that now because I think my inner child just couldn't accept it, that they were gone for a long time.
Mm.
And then
Mm.
losing my family, it took me a long time to accept that as well. But I think coming out of limbo, like I felt like I was in this place where I couldn't move forward. My new life hadn't
Mm.
begun yet. I was stuck in healing. And it really did feel like I was still stuck in the pit.
Yeah, can really feel like that, can't it? You just like you're like you're like in that dark tunnel, and you just don't know is there ever gonna be light at the end of this tunnel?
Am I ever going to feel okay again? Am I ever going
Yeah.
to not wake up thinking about my family or being angry about them abandoning me or rejecting me? Like there was a lot of chronic thoughts around them as well for a long time where I just couldn't let go. And I would think about them all day, every day. And there was a time where I used to post Instagram stories just for their benefit, you know, for
Mm.
them to see, for them to hear my side of the story. But they never reached out. None
Mm.
of them ever contacted me. They never asked to hear my side of the story. So
Mm.
eventually, I think I went through phases of throwing out pictures, then deleting my Instagram, then deleting my old Facebook, getting rid of everything from my old life slowly and
Yeah.
starting to accept that they're gone. They're not coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, that must have been really, really difficult. But it sounds like that otherwise it sounds like you're, mostly functional now. It sounds like you've gotten over the worst of it. Obviously, yeah, there is that can be like that last 20% or last 10% where it's like, if only I could kind of get this bit kind of healed.
It's learning to
And
trust again. That's where I'm at right now. Learning to trust people, learning to have community and people around
mm,
me. Because I have started to spend more time with his family and I go to the beach or go for a day out, but then I come home and I'm overthinking everything. So I'm still at that stage where I'm learning to trust.
yeah,
But because I don't want to go through such severe loss again.
of course. Yeah. Yeah. That really makes sense to me. And can I ask, I mean, have the panic attacks stopped now? Have they more or less stopped? Yeah, fantastic. So goes to show that, doesn't it, that healing is and recovery is possible.
Yeah, it is possible. I think believing as well, because I think we can form an identity of being broken or being traumatized or being sick. I definitely
Mm.
fell into that at times where that illness became my identity. If you don't come out of agreement with that identity, then you may never actually heal. We have to believe that healing is possible.
Yeah, exactly. And sadly, I mean, this is something that I talk about in my book, The 7 Questions. One of my previous therapists said to me that the clinical labels were intended for the clinicians and the therapists, not for the patients. It was so that, clinicians knew what we were treating. And he thinks that a lot of harm has been done with some of these. It's not that the conditions don't exist, but it's the label, and kind of labeling theory in psychology says that sometimes when you give someone a label, they can start to over-identify with that. So it's like, this is who I am. I'm an alcoholic, or I'm a traumatized person. I'm a fragile person. I'm a victim. Yeah, PTSD is something you can have, but it doesn't have to be like your entire identity either.
Yeah, it's only one part of you. And we
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
and I think embracing all parts as well, because
Mm.
I think when we are healing, it's almost like we want some of these things to just go away. But instead, I integrate them back into me. So they're all parts of me and they're all loved. by Jesus. And no
Uh,
matter how broken I was, no matter the things I did in my past, things like coping mechanisms that were negative. Like there was a whole year where I just smoked weed to cope, you know?
oh yeah, I know fellows in recovery who have so much trauma. They are doing exactly the same. They're smoking so much weed, and I think they're doing that to try to kind of self-regulate.
Yeah. But like instead of having hatred for that version of me, I'm recognizing that that was a coping mechanism and it's just a band aid for your pain and learning to love that part of you and recognize that
Mm,
they can be healed too, that that
mm,
temptation and that addiction can all go away once you
yeah.
accept and love these broken parts of you and bring them back home.
Oh, I love that. Bring them back home. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's really. I have to say, it's really warmed my heart, genuinely, Michelle. Hearing your story, truly, it really has, and it's made me think about: do I need to bring in more self energy, self compassion, or the self love? But sometimes that self love, I think, can be very difficult for people to access, especially if they've got very low self esteem and a lot of complex trauma. And I think this is where maybe the concept of a loving higher power, however people choose to, I mean, in 12 step, we never kind of prescribe what the higher power should be. We just say we call it God, you call it higher power. The point is that if you can kind of accept, like, there is this unconditional, powerful, loving force, universal force. Dr. Frank Anderson, a psychiatrist, he calls self-energy a number of things. He calls it, Buddha energy, meta. There's these different names for it. And I appreciate your Christian beliefs. Obviously, you want to refer to it as Holy Spirit, and totally respect that. But there's other kind of practices that, spiritual practices, and they have kind of different names for what I think is this higher power. And it's such a powerful thing to be connected to, what is basically God. I think, but we call it higher power generally in 12 step. You have to remember 12 step recovery is programs like Alcoholics Anonymous and adult children of alcoholics. 12 step recovery is what Bill Wilson, the co-founder of 12 step, he calls it spiritual kindergarten. It's like you got all these people who are probably very spiritually allergic to some degree, and yeah, it's like we're taking these baby steps.
Yeah,
We're
I
taking these.
respect that because I know for me it was a step by step journey of faith as well, and I didn't just come
Yeah.
straight to Christianity. It took time,
Oh, same here. Yeah. It coming to faith is the same for me. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everyone does get there, or everyone has their own beliefs, and I don't try to push anything on anyone. So, but I do believe that some spiritual practices are harmful. So there's just certain
Sure.
things that I wouldn't recommend.
Of course, and you're right. The journey to developing some kind of faith, from my experience anyway, especially if you've come from a lot of trauma, it's not an overnight thing. It took me a while. I mean, the 12 step, I say that 12 step, the first 2 years of 12 step kind of cracked open the door a little bit. So I came into 12 step as this devout atheist who was literally spiritually allergic. I nearly ran out of my first meeting when I heard prayers. Like, I literally nearly ran out of the meeting. I thought maybe this is some kind of trick by the church to kind of get me indoctrinated. And I literally was going to yell, I'm not here to be indoctrinated.
That's
But
what I was terrified of as well, because for me, like I have my own relationship with Jesus Christ, but I don't necessarily follow a specific church because I'm very
mm,
aware of how some people are indoctrinated, how some places are very cult-like. And when you grow
sure.
up in trauma, oh,
Yeah.
you don't want that. Like, I don't want
No,
to be
I don't.
controlled. So I understand that completely. Like I do a lot of teaching on spiritual abuse and spiritual harm
Yeah. Oh,
and
that's
how the
great.
church can sometimes be an oppressive environment. So I get
Yeah.
that.
Oh, it can. It can. And it can be a very, these days, especially in England and maybe in Ireland too, it can also be a very political environment, which is quite sad. Well, look, it sounds like it sounds like you're in a pretty good place. I mean, I know you said there's that last kind of 20%, and I know what you mean. I also feel that way. Also, there's things I'm still trying to work on, and I'm doing some, I've done some IFS around it. I've also done self EMDR, but it sounds like on the whole, your life sounds like it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's stable. And I never thought I would say that I feel stable, I feel safe in general.
Yeah,
And that's a beautiful place to be.
that is, yeah. I mean, if you had any advice for people watching this who are, perhaps struggling with PTSD, kind of what would be your, in your opinion, as someone with, who's an expert by lived experience and who's also now kind of, on the other side of that dark tunnel, what kind of, tips might you perhaps give to someone else who's in that pit right now, who's in that dark tunnel with PTSD?
I think find your gifts first of all, because during that dark stage in my life, I started to write music and sing, and I put all my pain into something creative. And that helped me get through some dark moments. Instead of getting stuck in the fear and the panic, I would come and do something creative with my time. And that would get me out of my head. It would get me into my body. I would feel all my emotions. I think don't be afraid of your emotions. That's so important because we tend to avoid them. As
Mm,
humans, we tend to avoid hard things, but you can't really bypass them. Even in Christianity, there's a lot of spiritual bypassing around your emotions and just be
mm,
strong and just trust. And like, it's like you're not allowed to feel, but you have
mm.
to feel. That's the only way to truly heal. You have to feel your emotions. You have to be real with yourself. You have to be honest because when you go out into the real world, everybody's going to come for you. Like if you're honest about how you're truly feeling with other people, they're all going to minimize, they're all going to have something to say about it. But if you can't be real with yourself, like I think creating that safe space just to be honest with yourself, whether that's journaling, whether it's through your faith or through prayer, but being real about how you're feeling. And you don't have to be real with the whole world because
Sure.
that can be really uncomfortable being vulnerable. But I think
Mm,
that's how I learned to heal was by learning to be vulnerable because it's something that I wasn't ever really allowed to be. I always had to be strong. I always had to be resilient. And I was always told, toughen up and pull up your socks. That's how I was raised. But learning to actually soften and fall apart sometimes. Because if I didn't go through that season of being broken and letting myself fall to the ground, I don't know if I ever would have gotten up. Like sometimes you kind of have to let yourself collapse a little bit when you've been through so much. It's
mm.
part of the journey.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think it is. I think it is part of the journey. And it sounds like, you've been on this incredible adventure. I mean, any kind of advice for people? I mean, there may be some people who are like, okay, but, I've tried praying and, nothing seems to be happening. I mean, what kind of, what would be your advice there?
I think addressing shame is a really big one. It can cause us to be very afraid of the mirror and we're not able to actually look within or look at the past or look at the things that we've been through. But you have to be willing to actually face it, and say, I think it's about being real with yourself, because there's so many people that will minimize, or like I hear it in conversations daily when I'm talking to people, how they minimize things they've been through or minimize something somebody else is going through. Or they'll say, oh, well, at some point you just have to get over it. You just have to get on with it. It is what it is. But that's actually really impossible to do because these things live within us. Like if you have broken parts of you that are still wounded, the only way to actually get healed from that is to address the wound. You have to
Mm,
look for your wounds and ask, what are my triggers? What am I reacting to? What about that person bothered me? Why did I get so angry? Why am
mm.
I sitting here thinking about this person for a week? Because the trigger is reflecting, it's showing you a mirror of what
Yeah.
you have to see within yourself. Because our triggers are giving us clues all the time.
They are. And I think, unfortunately, the society we live in nowadays is that there can be this kind of expectation of, oh, I'm triggered and therefore you need to change. You've got to you've got to change what you're doing to accommodate me because I'm triggered. But yeah, but well, in 12 step anyway, we'd say that, we spent our whole lives trying to be, we call it the actor who's trying to run the show. The actor's trying to organize the lights and trying to tell the other actors what to do. Before recovery, we tried to change the world to meet us, but actually, we had to eventually change ourselves in order to meet the world.
Yeah. We have to become unfazed and unbothered by everyone, because
Mm.
when you have a lot of trauma, you're constantly triggered by the people around you. We're
Yeah,
going to
you
trigger your
are.
rejection, your
Yeah,
abandonment, your loneliness, your fear of people leaving you, and every little thing can become a trigger. So the triggers would always be the clues for me, and then I would look within and I would try to heal it and try to understand why does this bother me so much? Like I would
yeah,
sit in prayer and ask the Holy Spirit why why is my neighbor driving me crazy? Like, why can I not stand this person? And it's usually because they remind me of something negative that happened to me or the way somebody in particular treated me in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in psychotherapy, we call this transference, where someone kind of reminds you of someone else, and then it triggers kind of a certain kind of reaction in you. And then if you react in that way to that person can then start reacting. Then there's what's called countertransference, and they start, reacting in a certain way. So am I right in understanding, like, in summary, basically, that the key for you was to kind of pray over the part of you that was kind of like scared or something, or carrying like some kind of trauma, and you would like ask the Holy Spirit to heal this particular part. Is that right?
But I would ask the Holy Spirit to reveal what needs healing today. And then a memory
Okay.
would come up. Then I would go into the memory, heal the child or process the memory. And then I would ask for more guidance. And often it involved forgiveness. And I know forgiveness is a very touchy subject. It's one of those things that can cause a lot of anger. And I
Yeah,
understand.
but it can be so liberating, right? It's like you're carrying around. It is so freeing. Yeah, it is. And like that is something I need to work on a bit more myself at times. But yeah, man, it can be, it's like, imagine carrying a rucksack full of rocks, and these rocks are they're just weighing you down, and like forgiveness is like when you take off the backpack, and it's like, oh, I feel a lot lighter now. And as one of my fellows used to say to me, she used to ask, well, how free do you want to be?
Yeah, because it's difficult, like, to when somebody has a lot of anger, it's difficult to explain to them why they must forgive, but they'll come to a point where they want to, where they're like, I don't want to be angry anymore. I think everybody gets to that stage where you recognize this has been consuming me, it's been controlling me, and there's no peace, there's no freedom. Because that bitterness, it's literally like eating poison and expecting somebody else to die.
Yeah. Well, they in Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, and other 12-step programs, they talk about. I'm not a member of AA, FYI, for the viewers watching, but I am very familiar with 12-step literature. And in AA, they say that resentment is the number one offender for relapse. It's such a powerful force that can kind of keep people kind of twisted, internally, and just full of resentment, full of bitterness. And then often you go, I'm so angry at that person, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to drink at them. That will show them. So yeah, so just to clarify then for our viewers, so the key for you was basically just you would pray and ask the Holy Spirit to just heal heal the memories, and heal the trauma, heal the part that's carrying that anxiety, that trauma. Is that right?
Yeah, well, different roots would come up. So one day it could be shame, another day it could be rejection, another day it could be guilt, you're carrying a boulder of guilt with you. Another day it could be grief. So just depending on which part I was ministering to, they could be really stuck in grief. Like the grief was something that really held me in chains for a long time. So the Lord would just reveal it to me that this is a part of you that is still suffering, and they may need help to put down that grief or put down that boulder, and they might need help to forgive and release their anger. Sometimes I would see a vision of this part of me screaming and releasing all the anger, and I would feel it coming out of my body. Like it would release out of my nervous system because it stores inside us, for this, from a somatic point of view. We're carrying it within, whether it's shame, whether it's guilt, fear. So I would just minister to whatever that part needed that day. And then I would
Yeah,
often
I
put
love
on
that.
prayer. I put on, like, the type of prayer I do is very specific, very detailed. So I have prayers on my channel where I'll pray over the whole brain to heal the amygdala, heal the hippocampus, heal all these different aspects of the brain, heal the nervous system. And each prayer will have its own healing, and we'll also pray for any parts that are still stuck in trauma responses or survival responses for them to be
I'm gonna check out your channel. I'm really intrigued, because look, I'm no longer spiritually cynical.
uh,
I'm sure there's gonna be some people who just sat there shaking their head and like, this is mumbo jumbo. But well, you're living But the proof is there. You're living proof of it.
Yeah, I went through being chronically ill to and chronically with very severe complex PTSD. I suffered with all of these things. OCD was a huge thing for me as well. Chronic shame. I had no voice. I couldn't speak. I had chronic infections in my throat, which I believe had something to do with that, like not being able to speak, not being able to be myself, feeling minimized all the time, or feeling like I had to shrink in order to make everybody else comfortable. So, and I overcame these things because now I'm showing up and being.
And you overcame them without a therapist. Wow, that's incredible. That's really, really incredible. And again, I'm sure there's some, maybe even some, some therapists and some psychiatrists who maybe sat there shaking their head and, trying to kind of find some kind of rational explanation. Because I think as, Western scientists, I think we have a bit of an allegiance bias towards the scientific method. So we're always going to try to be like, well, it was most likely, you learned techniques to self-regulate, and you learned memory reconsolidation by yourself accidentally, and you effectively applied IFS, but except you didn't have IFS training, or IFS therapy. And it's interesting that this still kind of worked for you. But I think miracles may be possible. I think there are some things that may be beyond our knowledge and our understanding. Yes, science can help to explain some things, but I think it'd be very arrogant to suggest that, well, it can explain everything. And I know that there's also been stories of, I've always been really fascinated with this kind of, near-death experience stuff. Like there was this neurosurgeon, brain surgeon, who had a near-death experience, and he reported going to heaven, and he was completely changed afterwards. And again, the psychiatrist, when you go to psychiatrists, you start talking about angels and stuff, they're going to be like, okay, we need to give you antipsychotics.
You have to be careful what you say.
Yeah,
But I remember during my near-death experience, it was actually prayer that saved me, because
yeah.
I had this support group on Facebook for my autoimmune illness, and I posted a video of me, and a lady saw the video and she was really worried about me. So she sent me a message, and she was a Christian woman living in America. I had never met her. I knew nothing about her. And she was like, I'm really concerned about your symptoms, because it was gone way beyond what a normal flare-up would look like. This was like, I was reacting to medication. I was very ill. And she started to pray for me, and her whole church started to pray for me. And I'm taught I can't explain it any other way, because I literally said goodbye to my whole family.
Yeah.
I really believed I was going to die that week, and I was terrified, but I survived. So, and afterwards I felt different. I was looking up at the sky and like noticing the world all around me for the first time. Like my eyes were wide open, and I was like, was that God? Like, what was that? So there was a dramatic shift even in my own belief system just from that experience.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear your story. And the name of your channel again?
It's a Red Hot Truth Ministry.
Red Hot Truth Ministry. So there we go. So if you wanna learn a bit more about Michelle's prayers, check out her channel. I think I'm certainly very, very open-minded. I think that there is such a thing as being able to kind of combine psychotherapy and coaching. Obviously, I don't know if you are a therapist or not.
I did like a few years certificate training in my 20s, but I didn't really, nothing really came of it until now. So I think it led to this, to my ministry work, and because I've always had a desire to help people, but I didn't know where I was going to end up.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's going to be some people who are really desperate, who really want to, learn more about these prayers. And I think you're living proof of like, well, you were able to get recovery from this. And you seem very sincere and very authentic. I believe everything you've told me, is true. I think there are still going to be some people who are skeptical of that, and that's
who have told me that my testimony is just an experience and it doesn't count for anything. But I can't, it's not my job to force people to, like, people who are meant to walk that path will feel it in their spirit, and those who it's not for they'll go a different path, and that's okay. As a minister, it's I'm just the middle person, it's between them and God.
Oh, I love that. That's such a humble. I love that. That's such a humble way to see it. Like I'm just the middleman. I really like that. I feel like that's a really humble way to kind of position yourself. So thanks again, Michelle. It was great talking to you.